You know, something pretty amazing is happening in our own backyards. All over the country, people are turning these little patches of grass into mini homesteads. They're looking for real food security and honestly a deeper connection to where their food comes from. So, in this explainer, we're going to unpack what it really takes to bring a little piece of the farm right into the city.
I mean, you can see the appeal, right? The idea of just stepping out your back door to grab some fresh veggies, or maybe collect eggs that are still warm. It's this picture-perfect vision of being self-sufficient and sustainable. And that's what gets so many people excited. But, as we're about to find out, there's a whole lot more to it than just planting a few seeds and getting some chickens.
And what's so fascinating is that for a lot of people, it's not even mainly about the food. Research like this from the University of Kentucky shows that keeping animals, even just a few, has these huge emotional benefits. It's that human-animal bond, kind of like having a dog or cat. It can actually lower stress and make people feel less lonely. So the key takeaway here is this trend is just as much about feeding our souls as it is about feeding our families.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the backyard farm boom itself. Then, we're going to dive into the legal maze you have to navigate. After that, we'll get real about animal husbandry, cover the super important topic of biosecurity, and finally, we'll look ahead to the future of the urban homestead.
Okay, so you've decided you're going to do it. You're ready to start. Well, the very first thing that stands between that dream and your reality is this tangled web of rules and regulations. This is the first and maybe the biggest reality check for anyone who wants to become an urban farmer.
It seems like a pretty simple question, doesn't it? But the answer, the answer is anything but simple. Before you can even start dreaming about what breed of chicken to get, you have to basically become an expert in your local laws. Because what's totally fine in one town might get you a hefty fine one street over.
And that leads us right to this invisible force field called zoning. Now, historically, these laws were written specifically to keep farms out of cities. The whole point was to avoid the noise, the smell, and the health issues. And even though a lot of cities are starting to change these rules, that old way of thinking is often the very first wall you're going to run into.
And just look at this. This table shows you just how wild the differences can be. In Dallas, you need a huge lot for horses, but in Pittsburgh, you can have mini goats on a property that's just 2,000 square feet. Then you have a place like Portland that's pretty open to it, but they have really specific rules about how far the animals have to be from your property line. The bottom line is, there is no one-size-fits-all rulebook.
And get this, even if the city gives you the green light, you might not be in the clear. If you live in a neighborhood with an HOA, a Homeowners Association, well, you've got a whole other layer of rules to deal with. And they are almost always stricter. An HOA can just say, no chickens, period, even if the city allows it, usually because they're worried about things like noise, smells, or what it might do to property values.
So, let's say you've navigated all the legal stuff. Congratulations. Now the real work begins. This next part is all about animal husbandry. It's where that romantic dream of farming meets the muddy, day-to-day reality of taking care of living animals and paying for it all. You really have to know your stuff here. For instance, a beginner might look at 2 miniature goats and think, a goat's a goat. But no, if you want milk and you get a pygmy goat, you've made a huge mistake from day one. See, the Nigerian dwarf is a dairy goat. The pygmy is a meat goat. Knowing these little details is absolutely crucial if you want to succeed.
And then there's the daily grind. You know, this quote from a user on Reddit just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures that side of things nobody puts on Instagram. It's not all sunny days and cute animals. It's dealing with mud, fixing things that break, and trying to reason with a stubborn animal when it's cold and you're tired.
And we have to talk about the bottom line, right? The money. Before you get a single animal, you're looking at a pretty serious upfront investment. That number you're looking at, $500 to $1,200, that's a pretty typical range just for the basics. We're talking about the coop, the fencing to keep predators out, feeders, waterers, all the essential infrastructure. You can't skimp on this stuff.
And the costs definitely don't stop after you're all set up. This number, $150 to $300, that's what you can expect to spend every year, mostly on feed, for just a small number of animals. It might not sound like a ton, but it's a constant recurring cost. This is the moment a lot of people realize that those free backyard eggs aren't exactly free.
All right, we need to shift gears and talk about something that's incredibly important but often gets overlooked in all the excitement, and that's biosecurity. We're talking about the hidden risks that can impact not just your animals or your family, but potentially your whole neighborhood.
So here's the deal, plain and simple.
When you bring livestock into a densely populated area, you're basically creating a potential bridge for diseases to jump from animals to people. They're called zoonotic diseases, and managing that risk isn't just a good idea, it's a serious responsibility.
And we're not talking about minor sniffles here. As you can see on this table, these are serious pathogens. Salmonella is probably the one you've heard of, and it's super common with backyard chickens. But you're also looking at risks for things like leptospirosis or even avian flu. Now, this isn't meant to scare you off, but it is meant to show you why managing things properly is so important.
So how do you manage it? Well, professionals on big farms have this concept called the clean, dirty line, and it works perfectly for a backyard too. It sounds technical, but it's a really simple, powerful idea. You just create a clear separation between the animal space, that's the dirty zone, and your own living space, the clean zone.
And here's how you put that idea into practice. It's basically a 4-step checklist. First, dedicated boots just for the coop area that never, ever come inside your house. That's probably the most important one. Second, wash your hands like a surgeon every time you're done. Third, be careful about visitors who could accidentally bring germs in. And fourth, handle those eggs correctly to avoid any contamination. It's a simple routine that can make a huge difference.
Okay, so after you've dealt with the laws, the hard work, and the health risks, what does a truly successful urban homestead look like? It's all about making that shift, from being seen as a potential problem to becoming a real asset for the community.
The really smart homesteaders are thinking about the social side of things just as much as the technical stuff. That means building things that look nice and don't become an eyesore for the neighbors. It means being absolutely on top of waste management so there's no odor. And maybe the most powerful tool? Sharing the wealth. A few fresh eggs passed over the fence can turn a skeptical neighbor into your biggest supporter.
And this is really where the whole movement is heading. It's not just about shrinking a traditional farm down to fit in a backyard. It's about designing smart, integrated systems that are built from the ground up for an urban setting. Systems that are super efficient, super clean, and really productive.
And this right here is a perfect example of what one of those smart systems looks like. This is a black soldier fly larvae setup, and it is so cool. You toss in your kitchen scraps, and the larvae eat it all. They turn that waste into two amazing things. First, they become high-protein chicken feed that literally harvests itself, and second, their waste, called frass, is one of the best fertilizers you can get for your garden. It's a closed loop that takes a problem, waste, and turns it into a solution. And that brings us to the big final question. For a long time, the idea of farm animals in a city was seen as a nuisance, something to be zoned out of existence. But as we've seen, when you do it with modern techniques, with biosecurity, with these smart integrated systems, it becomes something else entirely. So is this all just a nostalgic hobby, a return to the past? Or are we actually looking at a critical piece of the puzzle for building more resilient, more food-secure cities for the future? That's definitely something worth thinking about.